Hey guys, thanks for checking out the My Career Path podcast. Today I have another full interview for you guys with Brian Howard. Brian is actually an associate dean at BYI-Idaho as well as an executive producer. And he's been in radio, broadcasting, TV for most of his life, honestly. So it's fascinating to hear his story, how he kind of bounced around through different jobs just to end up where he is, teaching students at BYUI and helping develop a program that goes on every week on Sundays for BYU TV. So hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, welcome to the My Career Path podcast. I'm super excited today. I have a very special guest, Brian Howard. Brian, how are you?
Doing great, Colton. Good to be here.
Good. We're glad to have you on the show to hear your story and kind of how you got started and where you are right now. So if you can, go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do.
Sure. Well, I attribute everything to your dad because he was my mission companion. So there you go.
Awesome.
We made it to the MTC together. So how's that?
Yeah.
No, I'm currently at BYU-Idaho. I've been here for 24 years, just about. I started back in 1999, just like the Prince song, when the party started. Originally, I went into television. I did radio and television, went to school with a communications degree, and did that for a few years, and then came to what was then Rick's College. Taught there for a couple of years and didn't have to leave, and it became a four-year university, and I've been here ever since. I host and produce a program that airs on BYU television. We've been doing it for about 17 years. It's called Latter-day Profiles. It highlights noteworthy members of the Church of Jesus Christ or Latter-day Saints, and that's been a lot of fun to do that. And so that's kind of in a nutshell. And now I have a title as an associate dean for faculty development, and it's the College of Business and Communication, which houses finance and economics, business management, accounting, communication, and economics. So that's the college I'm in. So we're kind of communication is kind of the odd man out when you start talking about that. Yeah. But hey, I can talk finance with anybody now, I guess.
Well, that's awesome. Well, hey, I'm super glad to have you on the show. I'm excited to kind of hear your story. How'd you kind of decide to go into communications? What kind of led you to that and the broadcasting aspect as well?
Sure. Well, I was like a lot of people, didn't really know what I wanted to do. When I was a missionary, I had some ideas that maybe it would be a good idea to go into something that was TV related. You know, back in the 80s and 90s and pre-internet days, so stuff like this wasn't available. So if you wanted to watch something, it was on television or on the radio.
Right. You had to buy a slot. You had to make sure you had your time.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And I was a big sports fan, so when I came to Rick's College, we had a 1 watt radio station, 1 watt of power. Think about a light bulb and how much power 1 watt is. So it was an AM station, and got heavily involved with that. It was a lot of fun, but did play-by-play for like women's basketball. And,
really? You were a sports commentator too?
Sports commentator. Did that, for the 5 people in the dorms that could listen to the AM station. That kind of thing. And so I got involved with that. That was in my last semester at Rick's College. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, so I took a station just kind of haphazard. It was radio station operation. It was a class I took. And that's what we did. So I got involved with that, and with that I decided that was the direction I wanted to go. So I went to Southern Utah University, and there I majored in communication. I got a broadcast journalism degree, and I did newspaper. I was a sports editor for the paper for a while, and then we did play-by-play. They have a local cable outlet. We had SUTV, Southern Utah Television, and then a local cable station. So I did basketball and football. It was a hard time. There was a lot of heavy equipment. I have a hard time getting people to help me. So I'd spend, if the game was at like 5 o'clock, then I would start like at noon, and I'd pack all the equipment, get it all set up, and then I'd have some people that kind of show up, run the cameras for the game, and then leave, and I'd pack everything back up again. But that was fun. So I did that. That's what got me into it. Sports was the initial draw, but then I really enjoyed the career. It eventually took me into television news.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm super excited to talk with you about it. Let's kind of go through all of your jobs that you've held over your life. What was the very first job you ever had? Like probably as a teenager or maybe younger?
Oh, very first job I ever had was called roging weeds in a potato field. And so I was like 14, and you go and pull the weeds in a potato fields. I milked cows. We had cows, and so it kind of was a job. But my dad would split the money between me and my brother. We'd milk cows every morning and night.
Oh yeah, family farm. I've had a lot of people who are like, "Yep, I got my start on the farm." That's what I was working as soon as I could walk, pretty much.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. So did stuff like that. I worked at, my brother was a salesman at a car dealership, so I washed cars for a while. I worked planting trees in the forest up by Island Park because I had clear cuts where the beetles had ruined the trees. So went up there and planted trees, and that was an adventure. And then connected with that, I actually had a job that was pest control, where we would put poison oats down the holes near the trees, so we killed the gophers. So we tried not to get anybody too upset from PETA about that. But trees or gophers, you got to choose. So we chose trees. I worked at a gas station, Maverick. Worked there while I was going to school. Worked full time. I was going to school full time as a clerk for Maverick and Flying J. I got my first TV radio type job when I was going to school at Southern Utah. We had a college radio station, then there was a local radio station that played classic rock and golden oldies and AM/FM combo. And I started working weekends. The story goes, people who are older will know who Casey Kasem was. He did American's Top 40 back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I say he got me my job, but the reason is that on the weekends, his radio show would play on CDs, and the guy before me didn't like the show, so he put the CDs on, walked away, turned the volume down, but the CD skipped for about an hour before his boss came in and fired him on the spot. And so I got the job the next week. So Casey Kasem, in an indirect way, got me my job in radio. So I did weekend
radio. Got you into the broadcasting world.
Yeah, got me in the broadcast realm. And from there, I did a lot of other odd things, but I got my first job in television in Pocatello. Worked at Channel 6 in Pocatello, KPVI. I was a news reporter initially, then I was the weekend sports anchor and reporter. Typically, you'd work 5 days a week, so I did 3 days of news, and on the weekends I did sports. On Saturday and Sunday, it's kind of a one-person show. You go out and get as much as you can, and did that for a couple of years, and then I wanted to get an advanced degree, so I ended up going to BYU, and I worked part-time. I worked for BYU in their first integrated newsroom. That was a big thing back then because newspapers and television were at odds with each other. This was a newsroom that everyone would supposedly work together, which they really didn't, but my job was to try to get them to work together. So I did that for a year, and then I went to work for the Missionary Training Center doing language training videos. We'd have language native speakers come, and we'd do the same scenario in Korean and Russian and Spanish and Portuguese. And so my job was to write up the little scenarios and we'd video them. And this was back when nonlinear editing on your computer was brand new, and it took a lot of, computer power. So that was fun. I did that for a couple of years, and then about a year, and then I went to work for KBYU as a producer. We did a lot of live television back then. Again, this was before cable, BYU TV stuff. Yeah. So I did a lot of call-in shows. And so I produced those, did a show with the governor of Utah, a conversation with the governor. That was an adventure. There's this thing called 7-second delay, which most people may not know about, but anything that's live broadcast, even a basketball game, it's actually delayed 7 seconds. So if something crazy happens, somebody draws some nasty words, you can hit a button and it will, cancel it out. KBYU didn't have that. And I actually was hosting the show, and somebody got on and started saying some crazy things. And so, you couldn't stop it from going out of the air because it was live.
Right.
And so it happened twice. Once actually, and then they actually got the 7-second delay, which was really weird because you heard what he said, but then it kind of just bleeps it out. So we
just kind of slowly faded or disappeared.
Yeah, we hadn't practiced what to do if that happens. So we just kind of looked at each other and moved on. So
you've been working with media and kind of digital recording and whatnot just for most of your, working career.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I ended up there. A job opening came up at Rick's College. They wanted somebody who could do on-camera kind of journalism things, and also what we call new media. We still call it new media, I guess, but basically it was internet. And I had to take an HTML class at BYU. It was a 1-credit practicum course. Learned how to do websites. So I created a website at that point. Bandwidth was terrible. It was all dial-up modem. So I actually put it on a CD and sent along with my resume. And so it could actually have video and stuff. And video was a problem back then. Syncing audio and video for anything more than 30 seconds was pretty bad. And video was really ugly. but it was good enough to get the job. So I came up to Rick's College, and everyone has a story about Rick's College. They'd had the same opening open for 3 years, and strange things happened. Somebody took the job, then left, and didn't come. And then I applied. The third year it was open, and lo and behold, I've been here ever since. So that's kind of the way it works.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story. I just think that's cool to see how often, and I mean, you've really helped trailblaze media in some ways where you guys are kind of on your own exploring the new new ground of like digital media, internet, seeing that explode throughout your career. I think that would have been awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. When I worked for, when I worked for as the producer there for BYU in their newsroom for the Daily Universe and whatnot. They did the first ever streaming of General Conference, and it was back in '94, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a good thing everyone was off campus because the amount of bandwidth it took for audio to stream would have shut down the university at that point. So quickly, they did that for 2 years, and then the church took it over. But the first time that was actually streamed out live was through BYU and through their actual news organization that streamed conference live. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool. That's cool that you got to be a part of that.
Yeah.
What do you think was the biggest factor that kind of led you back to Ricks College and kind of being the associate dean as well as working in communications so much?
Sure. Well, the TV world is pretty cutthroat, so I liked TV, and it was entry-level jobs are pretty low paying, notoriously so. And you have to work in your way up. Usually, typically, you can't stay in a small town. Like Pocatello, for example, you have some people who have stuck around for a while. That's probably because they have a spouse that has a better paying job than they do.
That's right.
And so they stick around because they like it. But you usually have to move a lot. I have a brother-in-law also. That's actually, I met my wife through my brother-in-law. He was the weatherman there in Pocatello, and I was doing the weekend sports. But that was his second job. He'd moved from Lewiston, Idaho to there. Then he went to Peoria, Illinois. Then he went to Kentucky, then to Boston back to Salt Lake. And now he actually does something completely different. He does sales. But you had to be willing to move around a lot. It was fairly fickle. So for my brother-in-law, for example, they had a bad ratings book. Ratings weren't very good. They decided to cancel the show. So, no matter... There's lots of variables that go into that. Of course, you're only as good as your latest ratings, right? And I didn't really like the hours, so I did like the 10 o'clock news. And so think about most people are kicking back, ready to go to bed.
That's right.
You turn on the late night news, and you're at work, or they're early in the morning. You get up to watch the 6 o'clock news, see what the weather's going to be like, but they've been there since 2 a.m. prepping for the 6 o'clock. So I didn't really want that lifestyle, but I wanted something related to it. So I always enjoyed teaching, enjoyed Ricks College, and so that's what drew me into that, is looking for an opportunity. So that's why I went back. I got a master's degree, looked for opportunities, and one came up, and that's why I ended up in teaching, which has been good.
Who do you think has been kind of the biggest mentor or influence on you in your kind of career? Is there anyone that you kind of have looked up to and tried to maybe emulate their career?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, my dad was a principal for forever. And so I really appreciated him, but he made me decide I never wanted to teach in public school. I have 9 brothers and sisters. Almost all of them have taught professionally, whether it's junior high, grade school, high school, coach, and that kind of thing. And it wasn't as bad then it is now, but it was it was pretty rough. Parents get mad, kids get mad. So I decided I'd never teach in the public level, but I did enjoy teaching, and so that probably got me thinking in that direction. Then I really enjoyed, broadcasting. I was always fascinated with it as a kid. The kid who'd tear apart the AM transistor radio, try to get it to work, pull apart the record player, see what you can make out of it. So I like the gizmos and that kind of thing. So I like that kind of thing. I'd stay up late at night and listen to AM radio, where you could listen to around the world. Again, pre-internet days, so you could listen to an AM station from Oklahoma at midnight because of the AM skipped in the atmosphere, and that was fun for me. So I was kind of fascinated by that. But then I really enjoyed my teachers at Ricks were great. I enjoyed it. And then when I went to Southern Utah, I had a couple of professors, Art Chalice and John Smith. They're great guys. Really enjoyed interacting with them. So I liked the college atmosphere. I like the fact that you're always introducing new stuff, and you don't generally get jaded because every year you get a new crop of students, and this is all cool and fun for them, and they aren't old and jaded about grumbling about everything. I mean, they'll grumble about things. I mean, mainly
of course. Well, I mean, they're college students, of course.
And grades and that kind of thing, but a little bit different. So I had a lot of people along the way that really influenced me in the direction that I wanted to take.
Well, that's great. And I just loved your story about your dad, because in a similar vein, all of me and my brothers and my sister to some extent too, where he's been in the HR world for years, decades now. And we're all like, I don't know if I want to go into HR or not. But then we've all kind of moved into that position a little bit. Like, we ended up doing a little bit for whatever company, and now it's just kind of worked out that way. So that's just kind of funny.
Yeah.
So you got a master's degree. How important has that been for your career? Has it helped you? How has it helped you, I guess?
Well, to qualify to teach at a college, even, I just initially it was Rick's College or something like that. You had to have a master's degree; it was required, so you couldn't teach without that. And then, for in broadcasting, advanced degree is not really required. In fact, even a degree, they usually want you to have one, but there's plenty of people who make their way in and are just really talented that way.
Mm-hmm.
So a degree isn't a necessity, but it usually really helps. But then when I got here, then we became BYU-Idaho, and they encouraged us to also go on to get a doctoral degree. So then I went through the University of Idaho and got a doctoral degree, which again was a rough experience. It was great. They don't call them terminal degrees for nothing. You're almost dead when you get done with them. But it took a long time just because trying to do that full time. I had, church responsibilities, raising kids. That was when my family was young. My wife had to do bed rest with all our kids. And so it's kind of a blur right now, but doing that, doing school, trying to get, and we had University of Idaho did a cohort. So typically we do classes in Idaho Falls at the center there. And so you take, 3 hours a night classes and that kind of thing. But it was good. Got to know people, learned a lot of cool things. It was a good experience. But the degree to teach was required. If you go into broadcasting, stuff like that, not necessarily a requirement. It's just part of, depending on what you want to do, of course. If you want to be anything beyond on the air, then a degree is going to require something,
And I think that's what I've heard from a lot of people about their higher degrees and whatnot. Like they're really good. They help me out a lot, and a lot of that comes from the relationships that you kind of make along the way, whether that be from your professors, your teachers, or your fellow students. And I think that can really help, further your career and kind of push that forward. Is making those relationships and making sure that you're actually building those relationships with those around you.
Sure. Yeah. In fact, I hear all the time, students talk about, once I get out in the real world, once you get out of school, reality is it's all around you, right? All those relationships that you're making. Surprisingly to some, somebody who graduated a year before you might have a job at a place where you want to be employed. And hopefully you didn't bail on them on that last group project. So their last memory of you is burning them, So you're definitely creating relationships. And I think if people look around, they'd be stunned how many people go into business or do business with people that they met when they're first going to college. So it's a big deal. But yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, explain your kind of current position right now and what you did on like a daily basis. So like what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, so I do two things. One is my full-time thing, and one is the TV thing, doing a show for BYU Television. So that one, we'll go to the what I do now. So I teach full-time. I have a title of an associate dean. So as associate dean, my responsibility is help other faculty in their professional development. So part of that is every 5 years, someone can take a leave for a semester and work on their professional development. So they have to apply for that. So I help them through that process, and they work on a committee where we approve those, and there's funding that's involved with that. And then as part of that also is working with faculty just to help them, with their professional development. We do things like called brown bags, where we invite people in or we take on topics and we try to help people to get educated and just advance their skills. At BYU-Idaho, we're not a publishing institution like many are. And so our focus on research is on being better at teaching and being better at whatever your profession is, whatever you teach. And so a lot of things involved with that. Then in addition to that associate dean responsibility, then I teach. And so I teach digital social media as the primary course I teach right now, but I also teach a class in mass media as well. So at a day-to-day, I come in like today, I prep for class, I have hybrid courses. So we meet for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and go over the stuff we're working on. Today we're working on podcasting of all things, believe it or not.
No way.
So, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing today. And then I just came from a meeting just before this. We're talking about curriculum. We're revamping our curriculum all the time, trying to meet the needs of the students. So we went over that. It got a little, it was, I wouldn't say heated. People had many opinions. So we talked over that, and then and that's pretty much a day-to-day. So a fair amount of meetings. I have a regular meeting with the University Development Committee where we review these leaves for people, and then involved in some other committees as well. So yeah, it's good. It's fun to be part of that. And then the teaching, that's a little bit less now. When you're teaching full time. Here we teach a lot. You teach basically twice as much as most people because we don't do the research. So, but that's been good. For the other hat, so I've been producing the show Latter-day Profiles for BYU Television for about 17 years. We started out as a class project. I had worked at KBYU, which became BYU Television. Well, they're two different things, but BYU TV is the national and international broadcast place. And they became BYU TV. It's kind of a funny story. They got on, it was Dish or any one of the systems. And they told them, hey, great, we're starting you up within 24 hours, but you have to have 24 hours worth of programming. And so if you ever watch BYU TV back in the early part of it, it was like conference talks and devotionals 24/7.
Just replay certain things for that sort of.
So I pitched a couple ideas, but came up with the idea that, okay, we could do an interview program. I would be probably the only main thing because I, stay there year after year after year, and students would do all the production. They'd help me book guests and all that kind of stuff. So we started out, it was pretty rudimentary because we didn't have a lot of money and our studio was kind of lame. But over the years, we've improved our production quality, and we do 24 episodes a year. And so my main responsibility is I track down the guests, I invite them on, I do the research for that, and then do the interviews. Students do the production, so a lot of times we'll set up at the LDS Motion Picture Studio in Utah. We'll invite 6 to 8 guests, and we'll do that all in one day and shoot all those interviews. Then once they get done, they'll take them back, and they usually ask the guests for maybe some visuals. They talk about their life and whatnot. We'll get some family pictures or whatever. Mm-hmm. They'll edit that in, make sure it meets the standards for BYU TV because it's got to have some specific technical specifications so it meets that standard. And then we get them all ready, and I review them after that to make sure they're okay. I'm the last one, so if there's a mistake, it's my fault. So if your name's misspelled, I was the final one who should have made that known.
That's really cool that the students get to kind of come help and produce that, because I think that I've always loved in college just doing the projects. You learned a little bit with doing tests and whatnot, but to have that kind of hands-on experience of I helped produce this TV show, basically. I think that's way cool.
Yeah, they can do most everything. I mean, the only thing they don't do, all the technical stuff. We've obtained a lot of really great equipment over the years. So when we go and set up, we did one just a few months ago, went down to St. George, invited some people there. We actually got an Airbnb and set up in there, and so we stayed for 2 days. And students pretty much do everything, and they're very good. And then we make sure we've got students who've learned good things.
Yeah.
so they can do it. And they help me out. They produce all the content for social media. And then my job is to review it. And then I schedule it on Facebook, Instagram.
You're the final stamp of approval that goes on things.
Yeah, and I put it out there. So they do all the really, really hard production work. And so I don't have to do that, which is great. It's good. So that one airs every Sunday morning at 6:30 on BYU TV. We do 24 episodes a year, and it just keeps busy because you just get one season done, and then you start working on the next one. So it's fun.
Is there a favorite part of kind of the broadcasting process that's you just really love? Do you love doing the interviews or the editing or the review? Or
Sure. Well, I like all different parts of it. For that show, then I like prepping and interviewing the guests, and that's the most fun. Is typically then you can call up people and ask them to come and speak with you, and which if they just call somebody up and say, hey, can I chat with you, and they say, who are you and why are you calling me?
How'd you get this number?
But because most people either they can be familiar with, or I send them a link to it and they're familiar with the show, and so I can ask them to be a guest and then just get to know some really cool people. And ask people, they're not necessarily world famous. Some of them are, but some they just have great stories to tell. So that's really a lot of fun to be able to do that. I like that. I like editing a lot. I do stuff on the side. I do some stuff for some local news outlets now, so I'll produce some stories for them. Do some documentary. I did a documentary actually about a local news anchor who retired after about 40 years and entered that into what was then the LDS Film Festival, now the Zions Film Festival. And,
that's way cool.
And they took third place in that, which is fun. It's fun to do stuff like that. So I like the whole gamut of it, but I do enjoy editing. But as far as that show, it's the interview process. It's my favorite.
Talk a little bit about journaling, because I think that's something that people are very much interested in. It's very not easy to get into, but starting your own blog or starting a podcast or anything like that, I think that can be kind of an easy outlet for that. What was kind of your start at journaling?
Well, for me, it's just putting into practice what I'm teaching primarily. So for me, I have multiple blogs. A lot of them are experimental. Some are better than others.
Yeah.
So I have stuff out there to share. We created one specifically for class, video journalism. And so I did stories and I put them on there and I kind of give the backstory about those kind of things. And so that's, for me, it's been a lot of professional practice, putting that into practice what you're teaching. Same thing with like, podcast stuff. We turn Latter-day Profiles is also a podcast, so I end up putting it into a podcast format and doing stuff with it that way. So yeah, I mean, the thing is, anyone can have a voice, and you don't necessarily have to reach thousands of people. Somebody
Right.
what you're doing, if you got a dedicated audience that's interested, then and they have longevity as well. Something if you're doing something about today's news, of course, that's going to be old after a while. But a lot of things like the shows we do, they have longevity. And, the people may change jobs. You can go back 5 years and listen to it, and their story still is relevant today as it was back then. So that's the cool part about it. So. Yeah, there's a lot of parts about it, but for me personally, that's been the biggest part of doing those kind of things has been practicing what I teach. Otherwise, you get rusty and old pretty quickly, kind of thing. But the tools are so easily accessible. Like right now, you're using Riverside. The free version's great. You can pay a little bit more and get higher quality video. But at the same time, I mean, to do this, think about this. When I first started in TV, to do this would have required a satellite.
Right.
Pay time, thousands of dollars. You couldn't do it. And now you can. So, I mean, it's just so easily accessible. And then it's just putting together a product that, maybe there's an audience for.
Well, and that's what I just think is so important is that there's so much information and knowledge and training and whatnot that's available for free on the web as well. That if you're looking at pretty much any career or job or anything like that, you can start learning and applying that in whatever way, whether it's, starting a YouTube channel or starting your own, graphic design business. And I just like talking with people about it. Like I did an interview with Adrian Ropp a couple weeks back, and he talked about when he was starting out, he was a really good animator and drawer, and he would go to movie theaters when he was younger and say, hey, can I draw on your window to basically promote a movie or something? And they'd be like, well, we can't pay you. He's like, well, can I have a movie ticket? And he would just sell himself, and just finding ways that you can kind of, practice and hone those muscles and skills to really, grow into any career that you want.
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of times people want, well, can I make money at it? You may be, or be an influencer. But a lot of times it's just having a voice and being able to share your ideas, and I think that's also a big deal. And where it costs you practically nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there is so much training out there.
Just costs a little bit of your time, pretty much.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Well, that's awesome. Well, talk about some of the people that you work with as far as on both the BYUI side and kind of the BYU broadcasting that you do. What are some traits that stand out in the people that you work with?
Sure. Well, my department here at BYU-Idaho is great. It's a communication department. So we have people, we're a little bit unique. A lot of communication departments, they focus in on one particular area. We chose to have a core area and then have emphasis areas. So we want everybody to know how to be a good public speaker, have interpersonal skills, know about media law, know how to interact with other people. So we have this core classes that whether you want to be a videographer, you want to be in public relations, or you want to be visual, then we want people to have those. People often call them the soft skills, but we're trying to reframe that to power skills, because you look at about any job description and you have to have the technical acumen, but they want you to be able to communicate, write, and if you can't do those things, you can't tell about your skills. And so that's an important part for us. So we have a kind of an eclectic group, but everyone has professional backgrounds. We have people combine news journalism, from public relations, from visual media, and that kind of thing, and they're great folks. And all of them, like academia, but we're a little bit different again. BYI is a little bit different than even Provo or other places where we don't research for publish. We're not publishing and putting things out there. Our sole goal is to teach and get better at what we teach. So it's a little bit different mentality. We don't have faculty rank here, so there's not professor, associate professor. So that none of that, really matters. What really matters is how well you're doing in teaching folks. So they're a certain type of people who want that. Other people really want to do the research, and there's nothing wrong with that. But these folks who come here really want to teach, and they're really dedicated to the students. And so that's fun, and I really enjoy that.
Well, I think that's awesome to know too, just because if you were going to go to BYUI, or maybe you're going to BYUI, the people there really want to teach. Like that is their primary goal, is teaching. Whereas a lot of different places, because I know at Utah State we had, and my wife and I both had different professors that, they were good teachers, but you could tell that they were really focused on their research. They were really focused on what they were kind of doing. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, and they have to be, because that's, you have to make that get tenure to be stay employed. If you don't publish, then it literally is publish or perish, right?
Huh.
We've had a few faculty come here who were at places where that was the case. They're great teachers, but
Yeah.
the research just wasn't their thing, or they didn't have that big interest in it. So, and not that we don't do research here; it's just not required. But
Yeah,
it's really
it's just
focused
not
towards
as
it.
heavily focused on that. It's much
Yeah.
more on the teaching, and I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, as far as, the TV side of it, it's primarily, there's a couple of faculty I work with that are great, that oversee things, but it's mostly students who do a lot of the work. So there's, pluses and minuses. Uniquely here, we have a 3-track system, so consistency is hard. So a student could be here in fall and be off track in winter and then back in spring. And so the continuity is a little bit tough.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of a challenge, but it's great. It brings more people here, so I don't have any complaints about it. It's just, it is what it is, right? But they're great. They're always willing to learn. Do they make mistakes? Absolutely.
Don't we all?
Well, learning curve, you can't be a teacher if you get upset that people don't learn, the first time you tell them, because they change, right? You can teach it over and over, but you got to teach the same thing 100 times because there are 100 different people to teach it to, right?
Exactly.
So it's all good, but they're great. I work with a few folks at BYU TV, but it's really indirectly. I send them the stuff. They give me feedback. Mainly if we make a mistake, then they let me know. They're very nice though. I said, hey, could you fix this? And I send them our stuff. We transfer all of our files via the internet, so 20 gigabyte files, and send them across, and just communicate that way. In fact, most of the communication is I put all the information in, basically a database, smart sheets, and give them their stuff, and then communication with those folks is really limited, and their emails back and forth.
Yeah.
And frankly, there's very rarely an email say, "Oh, that was wonderful." It's like, "Hey, would you fix this, please?" Which we're okay with that. The students and our goal is to have them never have to worry about us. So if they never have to send us email, that means that we've done fine and we've done okay. So when we get emails, we know we messed something up.
Well, that's awesome. That's good to hear. Just being willing to communicate, making sure that you guys know what's going on. I think that's awesome. If someone were to apply to basically join your staff or join, part of your team at BYUI, what's kind of the key traits or skills that you look for in a new applicant or a new hire?
Sure. So someone applies to be faculty member, say here at BYU-Idaho. Obviously, number one, there's some basic prerequisites. You got to at least have a master's degree. We are very oriented toward professionals. So everybody who's worked here has worked professionally for at least a few years, whether it's in public relations or some have worked longer than others. So those are the prereqs. Got experience, have a degree. And then it's really compatibility, right? Do you want to come to a place where you teach? Are you okay with that? Are you okay where we're not the sage on the stage? Really, you're not out publishing a book with your picture on it, trying to do that. You're the best thing you do is get students jobs and help them out in their careers. And so you're really kind of in the back seat that way, right? As far as that goes. And then, just, drive compatibility. Of course, we're affiliated with church. And so that's a big deal. How do you handle that and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And it really is, the soft skill, personality driven. Can you communicate well? How do you get along well with others? How would you do well with students? We always have people come and do a teaching demo where they interact with students. We actually have focus groups. Students have lunch with our candidates, so they talk to the students, and afterwards we talk to the students, ask about their impressions.
Really, that's cool. That's fun.
That kind of stuff. Yeah, and so that's great. And departmentally, we come to a consensus. We do have a hiring committee, but then we invite everybody in the department to come together to discuss it and see who's going to be the best fit. And and sometimes it's a surprise. Sometimes someone who isn't as academically qualified ends up being the person that just seems like the right one. But that's been a fun process. So those are the kind of things, though. But basic qualifications, obviously. Yeah. Then beyond that, it really is those soft skills.
Oh, I love that you called them power skills earlier. Yeah. I think that's so great because it is really, and in talking with a lot of the people, that's what they look for a lot more. Experience and prerequisites, they're really important. But if someone really has those power skills and they really just kind of click or connect with the team, they're much more likely to kind of get a position or get the job because people want to work with their friends. They want to work with people they'll get along with. Yeah.
And communicate well. You'll be able to talk to each other and not wondering what they're thinking all the time.
Yeah. Is there anything that you wish you could have maybe done differently on your career path?
Not really, because one thing led to another. So I really enjoyed the time being a low-paid TV reporter. It was, is making less money than my roommate, who was an assistant associate at, Fred Meyer. He thought had pity on me. But the skills that I learned there, being able to communicate right quickly on deadline, lots of stress, doing all that kind of thing, led me to some other good skills. And so a lot of people I worked with, did branch off into public relations, or they end up in some administrative role somewhere because they made some great connections. So I'm glad I went that way, even though it was difficult. And then it led me to an opportunity to teach. And, teaching is an interesting thing at a university because they don't require you to have a teaching certificate like they do in high school or grade school.
Really?
You learn on the fly, right? So you have to have the skills and the degree, but you don't have any teaching certifications. So you learn that on the fly.
Yeah.
And so, so those have been some cool things. Would I change it? No, really nothing much. I mean, especially, I met my wife because the weatherman was married to her sister, and he tried to line me up all the time. So it was a miserable failure 4 out of 5 times, but number 5 was great. And so
That's right.
I would have met my wife if it wasn't for that. And I'd applied for a position at BYU Hawaii, which would have been fantastic, but I came in number 2. But then I met my wife a few months later, so it's like, I would have been in Hawaii.
That's a win. Well, Hawaii or a wife,
Yeah, I'll trade that off. So no, I mean, would I've liked to have done some things better and learned things faster? Absolutely. But it's, you look back and say, okay, I am where I am, and I'm kind of a product of all that, and decently happy at where I'm at.
Yeah,
so
that's good. That's the most important part,
So yeah, I mean, if I were miserable, then I'd say no, I want to go back and change things.
That's
but,
right.
I really like where I am and like the people I work with. So I wouldn't change it.
That's awesome. Well, Brian, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to come chat with me to share your story and share your experience. One more thing before I let you go, I love asking people about their funniest story over their career path. Is there any funny thing that maybe a mistake or something in your career somewhere that you could share with us?
Oh, I made a lot of mistakes. I could develop a boatload of them. One of probably the most egregious ones is in TV back in the day. So we did everything live, right? So I would pre-record a news story, and they'd press play, and that would play live. And then there'd be someone who's a graphic operator who would have the graphic ready, and they'd apply it live. So that lower third on the bottom that says,
that moves across.
Podcast host, would come across, name who you are and what your title is. And so I had made a misspelling of someone's name, and I won't tell you the last name because you'd figure it out pretty quickly, but it turned the last name into a swear word. And the person doing the graphics, called me up later and said, "Is this right?" It's like, no, that's not right. But they put them up anyway. So
it's too late.
A 5 o'clock newscast and then a 10 o'clock. So at least for 10 o'clock, it wasn't a swear word on there kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, those kind of things would happen a lot, live on air things where you just, make mistakes and just have to live with it, kind of thing.
That's awesome. I love it. I really appreciate it, Brian. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you're able to learn something from Brian. I know probably my favorite part was where he's talking about those power skills instead of soft skills, because really that's what people are looking for. So develop those soft skills and real power skills so you can go in with confidence to get the job that you want. So if you like this episode, make sure to leave a like and make sure to subscribe to the show, and leave a comment down below if there's any other careers that you guys are interested in. I'd love to try to find someone to get on the show to talk about it, hopefully help you guys out. Until next time, catch you guys later.